All right, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Governing Board. The time is 7:10. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Okay, let the record show all 5 board members are present. I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move that the governing board adopt the agenda with the exception of moving agenda item 6E for separate consideration.
Second the motion.
The reason for the request is we need to remove. Can I or no?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Ms. O'Brien requested this item be removed from the consent agenda. She won't be voting on it tonight. It's payroll. Vouchers.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries 5-0. Governing Board reports. Ms. Tweedy.
I don't have a report. Thank you.
Mrs. Fisher.
I don't have much of a report. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I was very fortunate. My son-in-law cooked the turkey for us, so I just had the 2 sides. It was great. It's amazing how little people talk to you when you want them to and how much they talk to you after you can't affect change for them anymore. I was very disheartened when we found out that there's a link between our special ed director and the company we hired to evaluate Smith. But I was more upset when a community member shared with me that they had brought it up, and I said, no, you didn't bring it up to me. And they said, well, we brought it up. And so I was even more upset that whomever they brought it up to kept it to themselves. Yes, we all had the opportunity to look at the documents, and perhaps we should have scrubbed them closer to find that. I really hope that the special ed review, it's taken years to get anybody to actually review our special education. I really hope that it is taken seriously and really looked at to benefit our students. There have been so many issues. My son has been in our special ed since he was 3. He's now 19. And every parent has issues, and all of our staff really wants to do what's best for kids. So that means that there's something systemic that's wrong, because it's not in the hearts of our staff. So I really hope the review is taken seriously. I want to apologize to the parents of special needs kids that I didn't catch that, and that whomever you told didn't bring it forward, because I think that would have been a very important part of our discussion. All I can say is work with the district. Fight for your kids. They're your kids. Stand for them. Make sure that you don't inform just one board member. Every board member's email is on the website. I know that both Ms. Tweedy and Ms. Frank are teachers or have been, if they're not currently, and I know that they will champion your child. So that's was one of the things. The other thing that was very concerning in the last few days is all the information. I hope that public school districts and charters can start working together for the benefit of the kids, and stop beating each other up because there's kids at the end of all of it. That's my end.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. O'Brien.
I also hope everyone had an enjoyable Thanksgiving break. It's been, once again, a busy couple weeks, even with that break. But I want to give a special shout out to Sonoran Foothills, Mrs. Hartman's 4th grade class. Some of her students were wrote me some lovely letters about their opportunity to vote at a polling station that she created. And so it was great to hear that some of them had to wait 15 minutes in line. And additionally, they also expressed that their results in the classroom were also very close, much like the actual elections were. So it seems like they got a lot out of that experience of getting to actually vote and learn about the different offices and elections. So just a special thanks to them. Congratulations to Mountain Ridge High School's band for taking third place. That's awesome. I would also like to tell you a little bit. I got to go to the Arizona School Boards Association legislative session where we heard from the Superintendent of Public Instruction-elect, Mrs. Kathy Hoffman. And it was really nice to hear about her priorities, ELL students, the teacher shortage, obviously. So it was just nice to hear her speak. We also got to hear about some legislation to follow, which is the school procurement law, the low bid requirement. There's some folks that are working on that, as well as audit services, the charter school accountability and transparency, and maybe some special education formula. I don't know how far that one get, but I think those are all good things for us to be looking at. As well, we got to hear a lively, it might have been lovely also, panel discussion from Representatives Charlene Fernandez and Reginald Bolding, and Senator David Bradley, Senator-elect Heather Carter, and J.D. Mesnard. In my 5 years of being able to attend these meetings, that was the most lively discussion from legislators to hear. So it was exciting to get to hear from them. I would also like to thank the community. We had a quick ask for our community for socks and warm clothing for one of our junior highs, and they really turned out. And so thank you for all those folks who donated that. There will be some warmer kids in our district, thanks to all of you. I have a request for you, Dr. Finch, if we could maybe talk about having a study session with the City of Phoenix Planning Development, as well as maybe the City of Peoria. Both of those cities are where our growth areas are, and currently, and it'd be good to hear what the long-term plans are in those areas, I think, as well for the board members. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien. So next year, will the fourth graders get to mail their ballots in to the teacher? Reduce the lines.
That might work.
Saying, just a thought. Right, early voting. Right. Mrs. Ordway.
Is it my turn?
It is.
Awesome. Happy Thanksgiving, and the holiday season is here. One of the things that Mrs. O'Brien touched on is the tremendous spirit of giving in our district, not only, for outside of our district, but for inside of our district. We have Constitution amongst a couple of other schools that put a plea out, an ask, so to speak, and they are receiving boxes from people they don't know, from Amazon with board games, so on and so forth, and they don't know who are sending them, but they're sending them because they saw the ask. So within our district and outside of it, I don't think there's many people that don't want each child and their family to have clothing. Also, on that note, Constitution has a spot where they also collect clothing for all ages, so from babies up. I didn't know that, so I brought them a whole bunch of baby clothes, and jackets and shoes are really in big need. So we have our holiday food drives, we've got the clothing drives, blanket drives, socks, shoes, gloves, hats, blankets. What we want to make sure is that all year long we remember that these same families just don't like to be warm and have their bellies full during the holidays. So we might want to continue to keep that spirit of giving up. Kids at Hope, is that Tuesday at 6? Are you guys going to talk about that? Would you talk about that? I just wanted to make sure I said it, so somebody.
Monday.
6. So at some other, Dr. Finch, would you talk about it when it's your time, if you weren't already? And then I have one more request. We do a lot of safety, making sure that we have plans for our campuses, for our buildings, but we have not done a safety training for our board members in this boardroom. So I'm going to ask for something to be put on the agenda as, and it's not funny, it's actually something serious. I do have board members from across the country that ask, what do you guys do? And I'm like, we don't do anything. So I just want to make sure that we do have some kind of a plan in place so we would know what to do, not unlike a classroom or, at a facility. And on that note, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Ordway. And you are correct on the safety plan. Every place of work has one. They have an evacuation plan. So that's an excellent idea. So I also hope everyone had as fabulous a Thanksgiving as I did. My 25-year-old son baked the pumpkin pie from scratch. I feel like I can officially retire as a mother, and he can take care of himself. He won't starve, so I was very thankful for that. I do want to quickly address one of our discussion items, discussion item 9A, which is the late start, early release. There's been I received quite a few emails from community members with interest for that, and a request from Mrs. Fisher to put this item back on the agenda. So when it was voted on last May, I was a board member who abstained. I felt I didn't have enough information. But when Mrs. Fisher asked that it be put back on the agenda, a couple of considerations. Number one, I've always honored any board member's request to place something on the agenda. So I felt that it would be wrong not to honor Mrs. Fisher's request. But I also know that our administration has spent a great deal of time since the board, by 3 votes, passed or approved the late start early release. So they've put a great deal of time and energy into those plans as well. So rather than putting it on as an action item, I felt to be respectful and fair and equitable to all involved, it should come back as a discussion item. Board members can ask questions, community members can speak to their concerns, Dr. Finch and admin can provide information. That to me seemed to be the most equitable way to go. The bad news is that our discussion items fall at the end of the agenda. That's not, there's no intention. Sometimes people think, well, you put it there so that we would all have to sit through a long meeting and wait. That's not why it's there. We have to do our action items that we're actually voting on first. So previews and discussions go at the end of the agenda. There's no hidden motive there for that. That's just where they fall on the agenda. So if you need to leave before that comes up, we're live streamed. You can watch it at home if you wish to stay throughout the meeting. Believe me, when it comes to sitting through long meetings, I think I can speak for all 5 of us when I say we feel your pain. And I know that we have a number of speakers, community members who wish to speak to that item as it came up on the agenda. So if anyone would like to speak earlier during the public comment section, which will be coming up after the superintendent's report, let us know now. We can move that up. Or if you wish to stay and have it at the end when it comes up as a discussion item. So
Wanted to wait.
Okay. All right. So that's it for my board report. And Dr. Finch.
Hello. Quick commercial on for the kids at Hope. Speaker on December 3rd. That's a Monday at 6, I believe, 6 to 7. Rick Miller, ASU professor, I think I mentioned it last time we were together. I got a chance to hear him at the state conference, superintendent's conference. Amazing man that's done a lot of research at ASU. I believe pushing the 40-year mark about research on in this area. So it'll be a good one for community members to visit and learn about his approach. Very obviously national speaker now. And from 7 to 8, I believe community agencies will also be available. So that parents can ask questions for those agencies that maybe work with our students. So that'll be a good night to come check it out. And I believe it's in this room, correct? Yeah, it'll be here. So you don't want to miss that. I also was at the band festival, the Super States, I guess is what they call them. And I now officially have a pet peeve. And it turns out that every time one of our schools is mentioned on the intercom, in sports or in the newspaper or band, they say Mountain Ridge of Glendale. Drives me crazy. We get no publicity as Deer Valley Unified School District. It's probably because we don't have a town central. There's no town named Deer Valley. So my mission is to convince the state band folks and the sports folks to include that it's Deer Valley Unified. Last year we missed the state baseball playoffs because we had a board meeting, but O'Connor and Ridge were playing, and I watched it. I recorded it and watched it. And the announcers for 3 hours couldn't figure out why these two high schools were rivals and were so close to each other, and that they never once mentioned Deer Valley Unified School District or that they were schools from the same district. They missed the whole point. So that's my mission, change that. So if you can help me, I do it. Anybody you run into.
I was afraid for a minute you were going to say you wanted to incorporate the entire district into its own town.
I would be for
Which might
that.
solve your stoplight problem at 51st Avenue.
I'm on it. Let's do it. Let's make a town, call it Deer Valley.
Okay, just for the record, that was totally not my idea.
Well, I'm going to take it. I'm going with it.
You can
Heather
have,
Carter, here
you
I
can
come.
have all the credit.
Yeah. I'll talk to the governor. We'll get this done. Last but not least, yes, there was mention about the special ed director be connected to the study. It was in the proposals that board members obviously had access to. I think I mentioned it in the Thursday update. But what's interesting about the special ed evaluation world is very, very, very small. And so the special ed director actually knew all of the folks that were from all the companies in some way, shape, or form. So that's not unusual. So I also agree with Ms. Fisher that we're excited about what they're going to find. I know they're interviewing tens of people, community members, staff members, administration, and obviously the board as well. So we're excited about what they're going to find, and then we'll begin working on that next adventure. So that's it for a report.
And thank you, Dr. Finch. So that brings us to item 4, which is the public comments. Again, all of the comments tonight are regarding the discussion item on late start early release. So is there anyone who wanted to speak at this time on the agenda? Okay. Okay. Later. You could admonish them later. Okay. All right. Well, moving on to old business, item 5A, which is to approve the proposed ASBA bylaw changes. I will need a motion.
I move that the governing board provide direction to delegate to vote on behalf of DVUSD governing board regarding the proposed ASBA bylaw changes.
Second.
Okay. Is there discussion on this item?
I would just recommend we need 2 votes, one on each of them. One is the equity statement, and then the one is the bylaw change. I think we could just maybe have another motion to approve the equity statement and then have a discussion.
I move that the governing board approve the equity statement.
Oh, second.
The equity statement that they'd like to add to their core beliefs is every school board has the responsibility to champion and pursue educational equity for every student by challenging systemic inequities. Excuse my mess up of that word. There's an attachment in the board docs that lists the Arizona School Board Association's vision, mission, key functions, and then their core beliefs. The one that they'd like to add is at the bottom, underlined. So
Okay.
that's...
And I did see that in board docs.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I was just
Sorry.
saying, Mrs. Fisher sat on that committee.
So do we want to vote on these one at a time then?
There's only 2.
Okay. Miss Tweedy.
How is systemic inequities being defined? I mean, if we're going to oppose them, I would want to know what they
that
were.
was my concern in being on the committee, is there was a lot of discussion surrounds adjusting I don't know how to say it. I don't want to be negative about it because it's not necessarily a negative thing, but we have laws. We have laws that require us. I mean, I don't know why you would, anyways. If prejudice in modern days is if you're prejudiced, you just need some serious help. Um, male, female, black, white, Hispanic, whatever. A lot of that is already in law. And we saw a couple years ago when the ACLU tried to push in the whole bathroom thing with the transgender. I and a lot of discussion on this surrounded transgender and things of that nature. My concern, um, all districts. I actually have a transgender cousin who is my age, so this isn't a new issue. There are people that are different and they need to be appropriately. Districts already do that. They work with our students. Um, a lot of the conversation, and that's where my concern with this is when it says systemic, it's changing your system or changing
Maybe I could direct the
a
question
reverse
differently.
of law, essentially.
What I guess I'm trying to say is I've heard systemic inequity defined two different ways by people who use the word or throw the term around. And in one, they're expecting the system to provide equal opportunity. And in the other, they're expecting the system to provide equal results.
No,
I want to know
that's
which
not,
it's saying we're going to be a champion for.
that wasn't the
because
case in this at all,
Okay.
either. It was systemic in the sense of your system will operate in such a way that's beneficial for all students who are perceived to be to have challenges. And that was kind of where I had issues with the question with the whole. I think the intent is good, but the way it came down was, you get to the point where it's like it's equity. Okay, they have this child has more of a challenge because they're X, Y, or Z, and they just it's not defined. They just keep adding, and so part of it's not defined, and the second part is truly wanting to make sure your system is operating in a way that will honor kids in a class. It almost seemed to me to be more divisionary than unifying, if that makes sense. More of a segregation.
When I read it, it says, pursue educational equity for every student by challenging systemic inequities, which would mean that you look through your system and make sure that each student, no matter at what campus, geographical location that they're at, that they have the same access to opportunities that the others have. I agree with this. I know that we have laws, but we want to make sure that it's highlighted, so we incorporate that in every decision and every problem-solving step that we take as we become better with continuous improvement. I don't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with the statement. I'm just telling you that was the background of why this came to be. It's not that it's good or bad. I don't have an opinion whether it's good or bad. That was the conversation in the committee, was making sure that all groups, as far as, and it's specifically, was specific groups. So to me it seemed more divisionary, the whole purpose behind it. I don't really have an opinion either way. Whether you do it or not, I don't support ASBA. I think it's detrimental to districts. So whatever the board decides, I'm just telling you what the committee discussed.
Well, we already have anti-discrimination laws. I feel a little uncomfortable with the whole term systemic inequities because, I mean, if you look at, for example, economic inequities, Title I schools actually have an additional source of funding that non-Title I schools don't have. So would you consider that to be some sort of an inequity? So we do have laws to prevent discrimination, but right.
And I think we could support equality for students, but I don't like the word systemic inequity. I wouldn't vote in favor of that. I don't think it's defined very clearly, and it means different things to different people. So for me to say I'm going to oppose it, I would have to know what it meant, and what would fall under the umbrella of systemic inequity.
I think because every student is in there and individual groups aren't actually specified, it seems inclusive as opposed to being divisive. And it's asking us as, I think Mrs. Fisher oftentimes challenge us to look at our Students' Rights and Responsibility book to ensure that we didn't have inequities in our discipline system for different groups. So for me, when I look at this statement, it's about assuring that when I make a decision up here, and hopefully our superintendent on down, is ensuring that every student has an opportunity to have the best education. And yes, while we do have some programs at some schools and some not at others, we also have open enrollment. We do our very best to ensure that there is a plethora of opportunities for our students within our community and open our doors to those outside of our community. I agree that different words can mean different things. For me, this is about doing something for all of our students. It's not picking out one group or another, and it is the very epitome of local control. But we all get to vote and move on.
Okay, so are we voting? We're voting on the bylaws separately from the core belief statement, correct?
Right, they're two
Okay.
separate votes.
Okay, so are we ready to vote on the bylaw statement?
Yeah, Sheila, are we going to be able to vote electronically? Okay.
Okay. So was there any discussion on the bylaw statement?
Wait, we're voting on the equity statement right now. Is that correct? The one we just discussed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Technical difficulties. My board docs just disappeared.
There it is. It popped up.
Yeah, mine is spinning. It's thinking. Well, while my iPad is thinking, I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
I'll also abstain.
I voted nay.
Okay, so let's move on to the bylaw statement. Is there any discussion on the changes to the bylaws?
I think this is the same one they've been trying to get through forever, trying to make it to where it's 2/3 of the member boards. It's very difficult to pass anything because a lot of boards just don't vote. And that's why, and because the bylaws say that you must have 2/3 of all, this is to adjust that towards, I think, 2/3 of people participating.
It's actually, the bylaws call for a 2/3 vote to change them currently. This would change it so that it's by a majority affirmative vote
Rather than the
of all
2/3.
member boards rather than the 2/3. So
Because not enough of them vote. If that makes sense.
Okay. Are there any questions or further comments on this item? Okay, if not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
aye.
Aye. Any?
Okay.
Okay. So 4 ayes, 1 abstention. Okay, so that moves us on to item 6, which is the consent agenda, and I believe we've moved item 6E out of the consent agenda, so I will need a motion.
I move that the governing board approve consent agenda items A through M with the exception of 6E for separate consideration.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Didn't pop up there. We
But I'm not seeing an electronic vote on that. Okay. Okay, and item 6E.
I move that the governing board approve payroll voucher number 10 in the amount of $8,409,870.42 and expense vouchers on the voucher summary sheet in the amount of $9,450,513.64 for fiscal year 2018-19.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on this item since it was pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, well, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay. Motion carries 4 ayes, 1 abstention. And that brings us to tonight's action items, starting with 7A, Middle School Curriculum Open Education Resource Adoption. Can I get a motion?
I move that the governing board approve the administration's request to adopt illustrative mathematics as a primary resource for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades.
Second.
Okay, Dr. Galligan.
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch, there is no updated information. The same is true as the last presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Galligan. Are there additional questions, comments for Dr. Galligan? Okay, then I will go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Dr. Galligan. Action item 7B, approve addenda pre-approvals.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to pre-approve the addenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, so I know this was attached to board docs. Is there any additional information you'd like to share? Dr. Galligan? Or
No.
Mr. Miglerino?
President Frank, no.
Okay. Do board members have questions on this item? Okay, well, I will go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action item 7C, approve employee travel.
I move that the governing board approve all employee out-of-state travel per governing board policy GCCE.
Second.
Are there any questions regarding this item?
I think it's the smallest travel we've seen so far.
Okay, so no questions. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0. And action item 7D, pre-construction services contract for Hillcrest Middle School modernization program.
I move that the governing board award a pre-construction service contract to McCarthy Building Company for Hillcrest Middle School modernization using the construction manager at-risk method contingent on successful negotiation of pre-construction service contract.
Second.
Mr. Miglerino, is there information you'd like to share with the board regarding this item?
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch, just briefly, this is another milestone of our efforts with modernization in which we will add the final team member, our partner, to the task of modernizing the Hillcrest Middle School campus. This will be the general contractor. We're excited about the opportunity to work again with McCarthy. They've done a number of projects with us, several of those modernization projects. Most recently, they just completed Avenue 27, the restaurant at Barry Goldwater High School. They also were the general contractor of record for Desert Sky Middle School, so they've done a middle school for us, modernization effort. We feel that they are the most qualified general contractor for the project. As you can see from the ranking of the 5 independent scores, they were ranked number 1 by all but one of the reviewers. They were ranked second by the reviewer that didn't have them as number 1. We're excited about the opportunity. We know it's going to be a challenge. This is the first campus that we don't have what I refer to as extra space, so there's no place to move students around or functions of the campus around because there's no place at the inn for that. And we know we have a challenging time just in terms of the environment that we're contending with some cost escalation and that. we feel that McCarthy gives us the best opportunity to be able to be successful with this particular project. We start just in terms of process, we start off with the pre-construction contract where they do a lot of constructability reviews, taking a look at what the architect has designed, helping us refine the scope. They get pricing for that, and then we bring back to the board probably early in the spring, right after the first of the calendar year, to the actual what we call GMP, or the guaranteed maximum price. That will be the construction contract, which we expect to be about $7.2 million for this particular project, to be funded from the 2013 bond authorization, and a small amount, $200,000 of that, from potentially some adjacent ways improvements that we need to do for egress and ingress onto the campus. I'd be happy to answer additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Miglerino. Do board members have questions for Mr. Miglerino? Mrs. Fisher?
A good company. No, I don't have any.
Okay.
McCarthy's a good company.
Okay. Well, if there's no further discussion or questions, I'll go ahead and call for the vote. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, we are voting on this. I'm sorry. The next item is a preview item. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing no, motion carries 5-0. Now, our next item we will not be voting on because that is a preview item, and based on the synopsis, it looks fascinating. Mr. Miglerino.
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch. So we were approached by both Honeywell as well as some leaders within the city of Phoenix about endorsing the potential to support a change for any future development on the Honeywell campus, specifically the campus that's at 19th Avenue and Deer Valley Road, or 19th Avenue and Rose Garden, I guess. This is something that I don't know that we initially thought was a great idea, but after Dr. Finch and I had an opportunity to meet with them, they provided some additional information. It will not change any of the current tax assessments for the improvements that are on the campus, but Honeywell is reorganizing some of their other campuses in the valley, specifically here in Phoenix, and they want the potential to expand the campus at 19th Avenue and potentially the campus at the Phoenix airport. In doing so, they are eligible for a special assessment ratio in which they are currently assessed at 18%, as are all commercial institutions in our district. This would allow them to, only for those additional improvements that they would have, that they would make on the campus, they would be assessed at a ratio of 5%. And so again, it wouldn't change the existing value of the improvements that they have. It would only be on any new improvements that they would make. And after some discussion with them, and by the way, representatives from the city and from Honeywell are expected to be here at our December 11th meeting to represent this, in their own words. But this would allow them to be able to continue to make the 19th Avenue campus a more viable option for them, which is something that we do feel is important and vital to, because of the size of their operation, to our district as a whole. So they qualify for this under what's referred to as a foreign trade zone, and so they are asking for our support of this so that they can, and not only our support, but every other taxing authority that would be affected by this. After some long discussions with them and some good dialogue, we think that this actually would be a benefit to the district, because it makes the 19th Avenue campus a much more viable option for them to continue to support it and its existence within the Deer Valley School District. So they don't have any, with all that being said, they don't have any immediate plans to actually make any improvements. So the net impact in the short term is very limited. It would only be if they decide to make some additional improvements, but it does give them a hook, if you will, to want to make the 19th Avenue campus a much more viable option in the future as they're continuing to reorganize their operation. So that carrot, if you will, is why we think that we support this recommendation, and we look forward to the opportunity for them to present this at the December 11th meeting, which is the point in time where the board would make a formal determination in the manner of a resolution to support this reclassification of any future improvements on their campus. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So if they're reorganizing and wanting to make improvements on that campus, is it a fair assumption that they would be bringing more employees in to work at that location?
President Frank, yes. In fact, that is part of the reorganization that they're considering right now. They just don't know exactly, and they may have more details because we've met with them several weeks ago, and by the time December 11th comes, they may have more information to be able to share with us. But that is part of what they're doing. So they have an operation in the East Valley that they're going to no longer continue. And so those operations are going to have to be relocated. They just don't know at the present time if it's going to be at the 19th Avenue location or the airport location that they have, but they know that they are going to reorganize. They just don't have any definitive plans to be able to provide to us. What they will present to us is there is a benefit in which those future high-paying jobs, because that's the type of business that they're in, would generate some additional potential increases in assessed valuation for us, maybe even greater than the reduction that would be granted to them, because they estimate that those people would live in our district and buy additional homes. So they think the residential assessed valuation improvements would supersede the discount of the commercial assessment ratio from 18 to 5%.
And presumably some of those employees would have children that would need to go to schools.
Presumably, yes.
Okay. Ms. Tweedy, do you have a question?
Did they provide you with anything in writing we could read through that you could send to the board?
Certainly, they do have a projection that they sent to us, as well as a cover letter and some additional information. We'd be happy to get that to the board.
Could you include that in the board update then? Thank
Please.
you.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yes, I would be happy to.
I'll read it aloud during my next board report.
Mrs. Fisher, did you have a question?
Essentially, they're asking for a 13% tax break on any future improvements, is what you're saying.
13%, right.
Right. So, do we know, is that long term? I mean, your taxes are changed. Is there a potential that we're going to do more harm than good? I know it is wise to give a tax break to bring the business in, especially if it's going to, in that area, hopefully make it a more affluent area. That is an area that has been suffering for a while with loss of business and whatnot. But is there, I guess without seeing the documents and what they're talking about, we just need more information, because the tax break brings them in, and odds are the reason they're telling you two places here and downtown is because whoever gives them the tax break is where they're going to go. So that makes sense. But we need to know a little bit more what that big picture is for the district overall, and what that does to other tax rates, as far as, are we going to have to increase somewhere else because they've been given the tax break? And you said it's also only on new beyond when?
President Frank, Ms. Fisher, it's any new improvements after they're granted their foreign trade zone status. And again, there are no immediate plans for that, at least, or definitive plans, I should say, at this point in time. But all the existing improvements would remain at the 18% assessment ratio. Any new improvements would be assessed at 5%.
They don't have a target date for approval?
Pardon me?
Do they have a target date for approval?
What they asked us is they wanted to have all of the taxing authorities make a decision before the end of this calendar year, so that they can put a plan together in 2019, calendar year 2019.
Okay. I look forward to seeing whatever information you have.
Thank you.
Mr. Miragulina, could you talk a little bit about their obligation to get our permission? You really mentioned that. It's kind of a twist.
President Frank, Dr. Finch, that's a good point. There's And we learned this well into the discussion with them. We asked exactly what format they want us to consider, and we suggested the resolution that I mentioned previously that the board would consider. And they ironically said that they don't need our endorsement. They think it just would help in, make a case that we would actually have it on record that we weren't opposed to it. So there isn't an obligation on our part to this, but they are asking for us to endorse it so that it would make their case a little bit more compelling.
Mrs. O'Brien, did you have questions?
I do. Thank
Okay.
you. And maybe this will be more clear in the documents you provide us. It is only for future development, so correct?
President Frank, Ms. O'Brien, yes, it is for any future development, and it is only for the 19th Avenue location because they also have a campus at 59th Avenue, 67th Avenue.
Right.
And it would be in perpetuity. So the new assessment ratio would be established at 5% for any improvements from that point forward.
Okay, and so does this in any way provide them the ability, so there are current buildings there, they expand by building new buildings. If they tear down the old ones, what does that do to us? And is that a possibility?
That's President Frank, Ms. O'Brien. That's a great question. It's not one that we actually considered with them, again, because they don't have any definitive plans
Right.
for that. So we don't know exactly what the improvements are, but that's a question that we can certainly ask them.
I guess I understand you don't know what the improvements are. I'm curious about what the consequences are if something like that were to occur on the tax base there. So,
Yeah, good question.
if
I would
that-
think that if it's new, anything new, so they didn't talk about tearing down anything, it was going to be more an expansion versus a contraction. But I came from Michigan. I've sat across from these folks many times for the last 20 years, and their speech is always the same. Trust me, it'll be great. And you can talk to any of the Midwestern states, and many of those companies left. So you are correct. Ms. Fisher is correct. That's what attracts businesses, but they're about the bottom line. When the bottom line doesn't add up, they head out.
Sure. And I think it's a good discussion, and we, want to have strong partnerships with the businesses in our community, and stronger business means stronger community and hopefully better education as well. So, but I think that's important information to find out when we were considering this. And then my other question is, have any of those other tax authorities given their, blessing yet that they're seeking? Do you
President
know?
Frank, Ms. O'Brien, I don't have any official record, but they said that they were working with all the taxing authorities. And it's not just those around the 19th Avenue campus. It's also including all of those around the airport.
Airport. Okay. All right. Thank you. I look forward to the additional information.
I just have one. Jim, do you
Sure.
know that, or do you think that list would be updated at some point in time, maybe?
Which list?
I'm sorry, the other taxing authorities, if we would know who they are and if they're thinking about saying yes or...
Oh, President Frank, Ms. Horway, yes, I think that the folks from, so we're not exactly certain. They said they are all coming to the December 11th. I'm not sure who all is.
all.
But
Okay.
I don't think all the taxing authorities are coming, but I believe we are expecting at least the City of Phoenix representatives, potentially somebody from the Chamber, and then obviously somebody from Honeywell. So at least those three members, and we can ask them to bring that information with them for the December 11th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Excellent questions for this item. All right, so if there's nothing further on this item, we'll move on to our first discussion item, 9A, which is a late start, early release. And I would like to begin with the public comments portion for this item. So I'm going to call the first three speakers. If you could line up by the podium, and Mrs. Tweedy will read our shortened, this used to be much longer, board admonishment. So Jeff Swanson, Kelsey Reed, and Venetia Hogland. Is it Hoagland? Hoagland, okay. Apologies for mispronouncing your name.
The board invites public comment on the district's business in general and on any agenda item in specific. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. To accommodate all speakers within the 30-minute overall limit, the board president may shorten speakers' times. Vulgarity, disruptive conduct, or remarks disrespecting employees by name will not be allowed. The governing board cannot discuss or act on any items not on the agenda. Board members may respond to criticism, ask staff to review a matter, or request a future agenda item.
Let me turn my microphone. If you could please speak into the microphone and just state your name for the record.
Sure, Jeff Swanson. Members of the board, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it very much. I have a young son, third grade at Stetson Hills Elementary. We've had a fantastic experience up to this point. My father was a public school administrator for 37 years in the Valley, so big supporter of public education, so I appreciate the opportunity very much. It was brought to my attention that there's been a proposition to have continuing education or professional learning, whatever you want to call it, which essentially gives teachers and administrators and people of different levels the ability to learn more, and I'm all for that. My question comes in terms of the time of the week that this is being proposed at. I believe that every week, whether it's a business, whether it's a school, there are certain days of the week that are more productive than others. This evening at dinner, when I knew I was going to speak on this tonight, my third grader was to the left of me, and we talked about this, and I said, Caden, tell me your definition of productivity. Do you know what that means in your world? And he said, Dad, it's kind of like when you talk about meetings at work. Are they productive or they're not productive? I said, exactly. I said, if you had to tell me a day of the week at school that's more productive than the others, could you do that? And he said, sure. So I said, give me your take on Mondays. And he said, well, Mondays we come back from the weekend and it's kind of difficult because we're talking about what you did on the weekend, if you had a baseball game or et cetera. I said, okay, what about Tuesdays? He goes, Tuesday's a great day. The teachers have set the guidelines for the week on Mondays, and so Tuesdays gives us a chance to kind of get in depth on that and kind of get going the week. I said Wednesdays, he said Wednesday's my work day. We really get a lot of stuff done, very productive, and I enjoy Wednesdays a lot. I said Thursdays, so well, Thursdays we have music, and I don't really like music, so we kind of talked about Thursdays, and I said, hey, arts are important, baseball activities, et cetera, are important. I said, what about Fridays? He said, well, Fridays is kind of our wind down day, and we kind of have a chance to get things done that we haven't had a chance to get done Monday through Thursday. I said, okay. So in thinking about this and talking to my wife, I am all for it. I think it makes a lot of sense. I definitely believe that learning more, being lifetime learners and giving our teachers and administrators and staff to teach our students better and more effectively, all for it. My question is the day of the week and how disruptive this proposition might be on a Wednesday versus maybe a Monday or even a Friday. So if you're able to consider that, I greatly appreciate it. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. Kelsey Reed.
Thank you for letting me speak today. I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Finch a couple weeks ago on this topic, but since I've spoken with him, I have gone through and I've researched. I've researched articles from Rick DeFore, from Jamie Vollmer, and all sorts of people that are all about PLC. So there's nothing about PLC that I don't support. I think it's a great program to bring into our schools. Everything that I've read about PLC, it talks about allowing time for our teachers, but never anywhere does it say specifically where we're allowing these times. So the biggest thing that they center on or they focus on in all the articles that I've read is collaboration. And I feel like there has been no collaboration. The parents have been left in the dark on this until all of a sudden we receive an email and guess what? This was approved. So I don't know the focus groups that were said to have taken place. I have no idea who they involved because the parents weren't involved. So that was the big thing. I feel like we were eliminated from the equation, the decision making. The survey that came out several months ago, last year actually, it was very ambiguous. It was almost like a tickler, like, hey, are you guys interested in a change? Well, here are some options. Are you interested in these options? Very pointed, very ambiguous. Never did I think any of us realize that these survey results were going to result in a change that was going to impact all of us. Friday and Monday, they weren't options on the survey. So it was Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So the fact that people picked Wednesdays may have been because Mondays and Fridays weren't an option. Not because they actually chose Wednesdays. Maybe they wanted to move to the next question and they didn't have the opportunity. They just randomly selected, because I'm telling you, that's what I did. In addition, I went through and I started researching all the model PLC schools. There are several across the nation. They are in Florida, they're in Texas, they're all over the place. And the one thing that they have in common is that they have different days of the week that they actually practice PLC. Some of them take a day off once a month. Some of them take half days Wednesdays. Some of them take early releases Mondays. They're all over the place because this is not a one-size-fits-all situation. Every district has its own barriers and its own issues and its own programs. My kids are still in elementary school. They're in aftercare. So I've talked to some of the aftercare directors. They are actually scared. They feel like this is a bit of a logistical nightmare. I've talked to two of them, trying to figure out how to get a couple people on board just for a couple hours on Wednesday to support the teachers, free care, and or the new students. Fridays are lowest day in aftercare. So these issues are going to be at a minimum. Although they still may exist, they're going to be at a minimum. I also put a survey out. I know my minutes are over, but I put a survey out just about a week ago, and I have almost 100 people that also support a change in the day. A lot of them couldn't make it. It's tough to get parents here during the week, but they did at least respond to the survey, and a week later, I have nearly 100 parents from several schools in our district. Thank you for your time. I don't want to take anybody else's time up. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Venetia Hoagland?
Well, board members, thank you for the opportunity today to allow me to speak here and represent myself and many of the other parents that also have concerns with the early release schedule that is set to begin in the 2019-2020 school year. I want to be clear. We are in complete support of all of the efforts the school district is making in order to allocate dedicated time for teachers to be able to collaborate. And with this time, I'm sure they're going to use it wisely to analyze student performance and some of the challenges that they're seeing in classrooms, some of the performance gaps, and share best strategies to overcome that. There's no doubt in my mind that the instructional strategies will even alter based on their learnings. There's no doubt that the time is going to be well spent and that it's going to be invaluable in increasing our students' academic achievement. Where we're really struggling is in the date that was selected. Wednesdays poses some major challenges. Today, I just want to focus on 3 of those challenges. The first challenge I'd like to focus on is for working parents. Currently, we have 9 early release days. Going forward, we have 24. It's very difficult for working families to be able to adjust their schedules so that they can be there on a Wednesday to pick up their kids. For all of those families that are unable to do that, they're going to be left with no other option but to take advantage of the after-school care, which is an option, but it's also a costly option. It's going to be $14 per day per student. That amounts to $400 nearly for a family to pay for one student. So these costs can really add up once you start thinking about multiple kids that we have in the school district that also need the after-school care. In addition to that, I was looking at some of the presentations that were attached to this forum, and I saw that the district is also looking to explore having an early release for elementary school kids, and then also a late start for high school. I'm not sure whether or not that's going to happen or be implemented, but if that's the case, that's going to affect even more families that rely on the older siblings to take care of the little ones. So that's the first concern that I wanted to bring up. The second one is that a Wednesday really does add quite a bit of disruption to the core learning time and schedule management. Wednesdays is typically one of the best learning days. I gathered from some of the email responses that I received. And the school activities there's so many that are scheduled on that day too. And the third is the costly option, not only for the parents. I mean, that's a major hit for a parent to have to pay year after year, but also for the school district. And from what I understand, those costs are still being evaluated. So I want to thank you for your time, and hopefully we can work together to overcome the situation.
Okay, thank you for coming to speak to the board. Next speaker, Ted Horowitz.
How are you all this evening? Just wanted to say thank you to the board and Dr. Finch for allowing me to speak. My name's Ted Horowitz. I have a son who's currently attending Stetson Hills, but will be a Sandra Day O'Connor student next year. My wife and I are concerned about the change to the half-day, and I've had some email exchanges with some board members and with Dr. Finch about that. I'll reiterate a point that was made earlier, that when that survey came out, we were given a choice. Do you want it on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday? There was no discussion about Monday or Friday. I haven't done scientific research on this, but a straw poll of every parent I know that has a child in the school has said, I'd much rather have it on Friday. Friday's the better day. Wednesday is the most productive day of the week, or Tuesday. Therefore, why don't we have our students in school being productive those days? There was a comment made also about sports, that sports are busiest on Fridays in one of the email exchanges I had. That's great. My son participates in team sports. I think it's fantastic, but it's a distant second to his education. And there's one day a week that I have no problem with him leaving school early. That's Friday. Not Wednesday or Thursday or Tuesday or even Monday. It's Friday. Because Friday, almost every Friday, he comes home and says, pretty much after lunch, they don't get a whole lot done anyway. In addition, another point that was brought up was parents. It's a burden to parents. Using my wife and I as an example, my wife works in the healthcare industry. The healthcare industry, as some of you may know, frequently don't work on Fridays. She's always home on a Friday. On a Wednesday, though, she's busy. She happens to be a dentist. She sees patients. If she leaves from work early on a Wednesday to be home, she has to close the clinic. That has a domino effect. Her staff are all hourly employees. That means they don't get paid for those hours when the clinic is closed. My wife and I also don't get paid because she doesn't get to see patients. So she has to close it. But on Friday, she's closed anyway. For my job, I travel frequently for my job, but they're usually 1 or 2 day trips, and they occur Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I can't remember the last time I was traveling on a Friday, so I can be home on a Friday as well. I know that's the case with many of the parents that I've spoken to. And also, finally, in my many years of management, I've managed offices for many years, some fairly large offices. If somebody comes in and says to me, hey, do you mind if I go home early Friday? It's generally not a problem. Even if somebody came and said, hey, do you mind if I go home early Wednesday? It's probably not going to be a problem. But if they said I need to go home every Wednesday, it's a problem because I need them to be working. I need them to be productive. And then suddenly you've got everybody else in the office saying, hey, Joe left early on Wednesday, how come I can't? So in closing, I hope the board will reconsider this decision and move the half days to Friday, not Wednesday. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I hope I get your name right, Angelia Harbison.
You said it perfect.
Good.
Good evening, President Frank, Superintendent Dr. Finch, and fellow board members. My name is Angelia Harbison, and I am the mother of 4 children enrolled in Deer Valley Unified School District. I first want to thank you for the opportunity afforded me and the members of the community to speak regarding the topic of this early dismissal. I understand this topic is one that you had all voted on, so revisiting the topic is highly appreciated. Like I stated before, I am the mother of 4 children enrolled at DVUSD. My children attend 2 different schools, an elementary school and a middle school. I think I can provide a unique perspective as I am completely on the fence regarding this topic. Having the background that as I do, I can appreciate the thought that went into the decision on what day of the week a half day should occur. I completely understand the reasoning behind not wanting the day to happen on a Friday. My understanding, and one that has been repeated among the parent community, is that decision was made to lessen the amount of missed days by students because it impacts the amount of money received by the federal government. The money received by the federal government is greatly needed by the schools, and any impact can either increase or decrease. It can dramatically affect the school. I could be wrong on that topic, but that's what's being said amongst the parents. I do appreciate the fact that there was a survey sent out to parents regarding the topic, and the majority of the parents that had voted were heard and respected with it making the decision. I'm thankful that the board showed respect and took what the parents thought into consideration. I do wonder how many parents did actually take the survey. Was there a large margin of error with a low surveyed amount of parents? And how advertised was the survey? I do agree wholeheartedly that teachers' development is greatly needed. Empowering and educating our educators is very much needed and appreciated, at least from this parent. That being said, I completely can see the issues that parents may have with this half day. While I know it is not an increase in half days from what is currently in place, meaning time-wise, from my understanding, I do think that many do not know this. I can also see the increased disruption to families. For instance, my children are enrolled in 2 different Title I schools. The livelihood of many of those parents is confined to limited incomes. Those incomes will greatly be impacted by a half day in the middle of the week without the other opportunities they have in place. I know that many of the parents at the elementary school utilize the after-school program available, one that is free. Will this program be available on those half days to minimize the effect of parents? Another thought that many do not think about is the developmental preschool programs. Right now, those programs run Monday through Thursday with Fridays off, and that is because of the half days that we currently have. The children enrolled in these programs typically have IEPs and thrive on consistency. Having 2 children who were in the program based on special needs, it was difficult to get them back into the groove, even with a weekend off. Have the needs of these children been carefully considered? And I know this is a high concern for those parents. Again, thank you for all your opportunity to address in regards to the early schedule. I applaud you all for taking this highly heated topic into consideration again, even after a vote. And I just urge you, those that are within the powers that be, take those 2 different topics into consideration when you come up with a plan. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. So I'd like to again thank all of our community members to come out to speak to the board on this topic. Just for the record, I shared many of the concerns that you have spoken to when it was voted on, which is why I abstained. I know a lot of parents who work 4/10s, so they're off on Fridays. I know at the county, there's a lot of people, where I work for the county, a lot of employees work that 4/10 schedule. I had expressed some concerns about what would happen at campuses where there was no aftercare program. So there was free childcare for teachers at campuses that had a community education program, but I am not aware if there was a plan for those employees who teach at a school where there is no aftercare program. And I was also concerned that there was no option for Friday or Monday on the survey, so that I think it's really important that we find out what our community members really want. If we're not giving them all the options and they're only choosing from a limited menu, maybe they picked Wednesday because that's not really their first choice, but that was the only choice they felt they had. So it's kind of like, if I told my kids, do you guys want meatloaf for dinner or liver and onions? Maybe they really wanted pizza. They're probably going to pick the meatloaf, but I still haven't found out what they really wanted for dinner, if you kind of follow that analogy there. So I'm going to stop here and open it up for discussion with other board members. I'm sorry, what?
No, it's a board discussion, so I think we'll be answering all these questions in our discussion probably.
Okay. So, Ms. Fisher, if you'd like to go first, since you were the one who requested that it
I
be
could
placed
answer a
on the
lot of
agenda.
those questions.
I wanted to clarify my request to bring it back. And I really do appreciate Ms. Frank putting it on the agenda. I know, to be honest, I really thought it would not get put on the agenda. I thought it would, I have 2 meetings left. And I do really appreciate you honoring my request. The reason I brought it back, I believe in PLCs. We've had them, and I've seen them work on Wednesdays. Of course, at an all high school district, which is significantly different. Our administration did an enormous amount of work, and they've presented a lot to us. And at the time, we asked the question about the survey as well, and it was a concern. It's kind of like you said, we're going to cut off your finger, we're going to cut off your toe, or we're going to cut off your nose. No, I want you to cut off my appendix. I don't need it anyways. It's not an option. The options weren't given, and I felt that the survey was very pigeon-toed. At the time, I believe that there was some, well, this is what the community says, they're fine with the state. There was just so much discussion, and the community wasn't speaking up. If the community had been fully aware at the time and didn't speak up, I wouldn't have requested that it be brought back. I requested it be brought back because there was such a long delay between the time that we voted on this or even discussed this and the information really went to the community. I almost felt that was a tactic to get it through, and I don't want to sound paranoid, but I thought it was inappropriate to keep such a big delay. Had it been communicated to our public at that time, we could have addressed this back in May. We could have had more discussions. We could have really looked at the full impact of this. Of course, everybody wants our teachers to be able to collaborate. PLCs, they give a teacher an opportunity. 2 excellent teachers can sit next to each other. One of them says, I just had this kid and I've done this and I've done this. I just can't get through to them. And the other one helps. So there's no doubt the PLCs are fabulous. But without really honoring our community and our parents to say that, what works for you, being given Monday, Tuesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, you're right. National statistics show even in work, Monday is the least productive because people are still mulling from the weekend. Tuesday has been declared the most productive, which I kind of disagree because Tuesday I'm still, it's the planning day, I think. But Tuesday and Wednesday are nationally known to be in the workforce as the most productive days. And then it tailors off on Thursday, and then we all know Friday it slows down. I am concerned, and I don't foresee, and I will tell. I have spent a lot of time speaking with community members. I have answered every email I have received, and I brought this back, fully telling the public that there's no guarantee. I have 2 board meetings. I'll have a completely new board in January. I don't know that there will be anything done before then. But I'm asking the district to really honor our parents because these are their children. They are telling you that there is a extremely negative impact on their children. It's not just too often we get stuck in the adult world of what works best for us, and I don't think parents were given the appropriate opportunity to say what's best for their kids. We're only borrowing them. I know I've said that, I don't think 100 times over the last 4 years. We are only borrowing these children to educate them, and we're very privileged to do so. I really think that we need to honor the parents who are lending them to us. And so that was why I brought it back. I agree with all of the points that were made. I did vote for this. I will tell you, I did vote for this. I don't know necessarily what the district will show me that would make me vote the same way again or differently. But the parents have spoken and they have said this is really not working for them. So I would hope that our district administration and this board or future board would please honor these parents and work with them and come up with some type of a solution so that this can move forward productively. Parents don't have to take their kids out of the district. Parents don't have to, they're not put in an uncomfortable position of having to choose. That's my point, bringing it forward and re-reviewing the topic.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Ordway.
Dr. Finch or Mr. Miglorino, whether you're absent on a Wednesday or a Friday, is there a financial impact per student per day per absence?
President Frank, Ms. Ordway, there actually is not an absence penalty anymore. We get our funding that comes from the state is represented on an average daily membership calculation, and so it's how many days the students are enrolled, not how many days they attend.
No, I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, and there used to be, probably 5 years ago, there was an attendance rate that we had to be concerned about, but that was removed from the legislation.
And then another question, maybe Gail or you figure out who's going to answer it. What is the staff absenteeism on a Wednesday as opposed to a Friday? Because when this originally came up and was changed from Wednesday to Friday, part of the reason why administration at that time had wanted it to stay on Wednesdays because they saw increased absenteeism from staff that did not attend the training. However, with this being not a half day, and it's kind of more an all-in activity, I don't know how else to describe it. Much different than the half-day PD. I don't know if that was thought about as part of the choosing not to add Monday and Friday to the choices.
You're correct, and the speakers are correct. The national production rates for adults are Monday and Friday is down, and also attendance is down, and our staff reflect that as well. So our rates are no different than the national averages. So Mondays and Fridays are common, are the highest rates for absenteeism for adults.
Okay, so really what I wanted to know is that when we changed it from Wednesday to Friday, did the absenteeism increase in our staff, or did it stay the same, or what was it? That's something you're not going to know right this moment, but if we could get that information, that would be really helpful.
There's also another angle to that, which is we found out in our system as well with our Friday early releases, which are half days. Remember,
Right.
These are 90 minutes, not half days.
Right.
There's a higher probability of parents pulling their students for the whole day and taking the Friday off. And I had frequent emailed discussions with folks about how that was good for their families, et cetera, be able to take Friday off, and et cetera, et cetera. The negative of that is if too many students come out of classroom X, then the teacher can't move on.
So to clarify that, so if it was a half day, they don't pull them out, but if it's going to be 90 days or 90 minutes less, they will?
Well, the flip side of that.
Okay.
90-minute or half days, well, historically, again, our attendance for students
Uh-huh.
on the half days tends to go down as well. And parents are more likely to pull their student for the whole day on a Friday if it's a half day.
Right.
We
So
don't have a 90-minute version yet, but remember, I ran this program in Michigan, over 2 counties with 6 competing school districts. We had this exact same discussion on Fridays and Wednesdays, and found all the issues that they are referring to come to fruition. Yes, attendance is down. Yes, for adults, and yes, on a Friday, you intersect with sporting issues. So yeah, all these things have been brought to the table, but I can answer any other specific questions.
So are we? Is the okay? So are we expecting or predicting that this is going to go so much better if we have a middle of the week early release than it would on a Friday, that it's worth, I mean, what we're going to get out of it is worth so much that we can try to figure out how to not inconvenience middle of the week. I know that when my kids were in school, the middle of the week, I hated it, which is one of the reasons I pushed for the Friday, because all of those parents divvied their kids out. If you were working that shift and I couldn't pick you up, you come to my house, so on and so forth. It was just so much easier on a Friday than it was on a Wednesday. And trust me, there were some people that would take off, but not in droves. So I'm just wondering if the gain is going to be that great that we would want to weight it that much, that what we seem to be hearing from parents, it's worth saying, no, we're doing it on a Wednesday.
I would say you're correct. The value, again, this is for adults to collaborate. So if we're missing a bunch of adults on a Friday, the probability of good collaboration goes down.
So we would not expect that an employee would be there on a Friday just because kids had left early?
That's what our a reflection of our current Friday half-day practices. We have never practiced a 90-minute release before, so we don't have data on that for our district, but all of our peers that are in Arizona that do an early release program do it on Wednesdays as well. So we've talked to them as well and learned up the pluses and minuses. It becomes the new normal when it's on Wednesday, and the community adjusts. But I don't disagree with with some of the comments that the speaker said. It takes a while to adjust for sure.
Okay, I'm done for a little bit.
Well, just real quickly, all the thoughts in my head. When I was in the classroom, I didn't notice droves of teachers taking off on Friday early release days just because it was a Friday. I mean, obviously you're going to have some people who do, but it's their professional responsibility to be there. I don't think we can use that to justify inconveniencing parents, because the reality is, if they're not happy with our PLC schedule, if it impacts them financially, as some of the speakers have spoken about, then they can choose to go to a charter. They don't have to stay with us. Sure. Okay, so I would like to give Ms. Tweedy, and then Mrs. Fisher.
I'm not sure if this is going to be brought back or what the discussion will be, but I abstained for 2 reasons, and I would just, if it doesn't come back, I guess my reasons for abstention are moot. If it does come back, the first thing that hasn't been addressed, and what did actually stop me from voting on this, I have not seen any empirical research and not correlational, causation, that early releases improve academics. And so I asked Dr. Galligan, have any of the districts that implemented this seen improved academics? So I wasn't even thinking empirical, just are any of our peers seeing a growth surge since we've implemented this? And Dr. Galligan said they were not tracking academic data. So then this year, our letter grades came out, and you said, wow, we're number 2 in the state, and 0.3 of a point behind another district. So I'm wondering, if we're producing better academic results than our peers, why we would drop what we're doing and copy what they're doing. I mean, if I did see, and I'm not talking about studies put out by the people that market PLC products, because they would have to declare a conflict. And there's a difference between having a PLC and interrupting instructional minutes, because we do know that time on task, and we do know that the amount of uninterrupted instruction does directly impact student achievement results. I mean, I just study after study after study. So for me to vote to interrupt student instruction, I would have to see empirical evidence that this improves student academic performance. So that's just mine regardless. And then as a secondary concern, everything that was mentioned here I would consider. Certainly the impact, on parents and the impact, but that would be secondary to, is this a good idea to begin with? In terms of Friday and people leaving Friday on professional development days, I'm a teacher. I know a bunch of teachers. I've discussed this with a bunch of teachers. People vote with their feet. If they think something's high quality and worthwhile, they attend it. If they don't and they have personal days, they take it. I mean, you probably get a higher response with PTO time than a survey. So if there's a lot of PTO time, they're not seeing a value in it, or they'd be attending it. I mean, I know because we have subs, there's always a tendency, can I make that doctor's appointment when I don't have to make a sub plan? So that would be some of it, whether if it was high quality or not high quality. But anyway, those are my two concerns. I would want to see evidence that it actually improves. I would not shorten a student's instructional day unless I saw some compelling evidence that it does enhance student achievement. And then my second thing would be that we address the concerns here. Thank you.
Those two, I can answer both of those. The work that we can get for you is John Hattie's work. It's really around the collaboration, being able to move the academic needle. What you're referring to, the empirical evidence is overwhelming. It is one of the best ways to move the academic needle. Your angle or your question is, well, what about Wednesday or Thursday or Tuesday? And so, and the instructional minutes will be exactly the same. So we are required by the state to put out X amount of instructional minutes. So that will stay the same. So that won't change it up.
Instructional minutes, because when you have early release, you shorten your block.
Right.
So you are shortening. You don't have uninterrupted instructional minutes.
I don't disagree with you.
No, that's correct. So when I taught sixth grade science, if I had a shortened day, we didn't do a lab that day. I'd have to fill in with something. It would be aligned to standards, but it wouldn't be the same experience that the students would have had if I had the full day. And Mrs. Fisher, I believe you had another.
It's
concern.
kind of went off with what Ms. Ordley had said. And it is one of the reasons that I did vote for it, is because of the belief that employees will just go home. And the more I think about that, we have a gentleman that spoke tonight who was in management, and I've been in management for years, and we've all had jobs, well, most people have had jobs outside of school districts. And I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, if you pack up and just leave, there's disciplinary action for just leaving. So to say that, our employees will just, number one, I think it's a little disrespectful to our employees, and I should have thought about it back then. I don't believe our employees are such that they are just going to ditch out on our kids. I think that if it's beneficial and they can see the value in it, I don't think they're going to walk out on our kids and just say, "Oh, I'm going home because it's Friday." And if they did, honestly, it would be up to our administration to address that employee misbehavior directly, as it would in any other industry. I don't, when I was a corporate trust accountant for Safeway, even if all of my work was done, I did not just pick up and go home. I reviewed audits. I worked with my staff and saw where they were at, or I reviewed their work. I didn't just up and leave, because if I did, my supervisor, she would have written me up.
Well, that's
and so I mean, it just concerns me that, and that was one factor. But it concerns me that that's an excuse that we're using. Number one, I don't believe that our staff. That makes our staff sound flaky, and I don't believe they are.
No, I don't disagree with you, but that's actually in legislation. We aren't allowed to ask, so it's not like the corporate world.
What do you mean you're not allowed to ask?
You can use your days for whatever you want, and we can't. And that's in Michigan. That's not the case, but in Arizona, that's the case.
Right, and they should be able to use their days. We're not saying, of course, if I signed off for my time, I don't know a teacher that's going to sign off for their time every Friday afternoon because they just don't want to collaborate with their.
No, I was just referring to national.
Well, they're going to run out of
statistics.
days sooner or later.
Yeah, they will. Yeah.
They use them all.
You know what? I didn't.
Yep.
And when I left, I got a nice payout for the days I didn't use it. Went to
That's
my
a-
retirement account. So, you know.
We give that speech to the modern kid every time. Save your days. So, yeah. But
And when I went on medical leave, I got paid the whole time because I had enough days. So, I don't think that you might have an employee here or there who would take advantage of that, but that was not my experience in Deer Valley
Yep.
with the way teachers behaved at the school where I taught.
Yep. I don't disagree with you.
So we haven't heard from Mrs. O'Brien, so I'd like to give her the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. First, I'd like to clarify, we have 9 half days, correct?
Correct.
And we're going to 24 early release days.
90 minutes.
What?
90 minutes, yeah.
Right, they're 90 minutes, so we'll have 24 of them as opposed to 9. So what I haven't seen or read anything, and if you gave it to me, I apologize. The community ed classes that are currently, a lot of them are offered on Wednesdays. What will happen to those classes in the 1920 year? Or has that been worked out?
Yeah, we're still working on that. Maybe Dr. Galligan can fill us in how far that's down the trail on the community ed.
President Frank, Mrs. O'Brien, community ed is completely involved in this discussion. For the most part, they're involved in the student care for the schools that have community ed on their campuses, but also working with federal programs and some of our title grants to see what we could provide for child care in our campuses that do not have community education. So we are working on plans for that. I think you're asking, though, about the enrichment classes that occur sometimes before school, but mostly after school. Is that what you're asking about?
Correct, I am.
So they are working on those kinds of changes, decisions as we speak. I know that we will have a website for community education up mid to end of January that will cover all of the child care concerns, and we can do our best to have information about the enrichment classes as well, but we might push that out just a little bit further because those are vendor programs, and we'll be working with our vendors on that.
Okay, I appreciate that you're still working on that. But I guess, and I voted to make this change as well because I believe in giving our teachers that time to, our teachers and our staff and our administrators to work together to improve academic achievement through their learning. I will say, though, that I think that I missed a lens when I was looking and evaluating this situation. So one of my concerns now is the potential loss of revenue for community ed enrichment classes, because if I'm the working parent and I work 4/10s and now I change my day to Wednesday, and that was the time I paid for classes, I'm not paying for it on Wednesday because I'm taking my kid out and we're going home 90 minutes early, we're not coming back. And I realize I could be the exception, but I think it's a possibility to consider because I know that we have depended upon our community ed revenues more than once. I'm sure every year for a lot of years, Mrs. Fisher is whispering to me to help us out with our budget. And I also am concerned about those working parents and the impact to their schedules. So I would ask that there's some questions here, and we've asked for some additional information that I don't know if we have further discussion or if we ask to have it on a vote. I don't know, but I think that, or if we do a survey, because I don't think parents didn't have Friday as an option. I know that when my kids went to school and it got moved from Wednesday to Friday, that made me a happy mama to have my disruption be at the end of the week as opposed to, and mind you, that was only once a month, but it was at the end of the week and it worked better. So I will admit, I think I missed that lens and looking at it from our parent perspective, and wish we had offered Friday as an opportunity for them to choose to see really where they stood. And I'm also concerned about the financial impact to community ed and enrichment. My understanding is, and I haven't sent this to you, but I would be curious to know, I was told that Friday enrichment classes are more costly to our parents than an enrichment class that is offered on Wednesday, which to me is another financial impact to our families. So if that is true. So if you could find that out for us, I would want to know that as well.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. O'Brien. So, I would agree in terms of the survey. I know if you look at it from a business point of view, businesses spend a lot of money on focus groups and marketing and looking at what their customers want. And they want honest feedback, and because they don't want to come up with a product that nobody wants to buy and invest a lot of money in that. And I think same thing is true here. We really need a higher participation. I'm not sure what the participation was on the survey.
15%.
15%.
Which is a record for our district.
But no business would invest money in a product if they had a very low rate of return on the survey, because the results wouldn't be valid.
The average is 3% for a survey return.
So, but again, it didn't include the Friday, Monday option. And I would hate to see us invest a lot of money. I mean, you've already put time, and I do appreciate and respect the time that Dr. Galligan has put into developing this, and you under your leadership, Dr. Finch, as well. But I would hate to see us make this major change and then lose students because families either couldn't take off Wednesdays, couldn't afford the childcare. And there's a lot of potentially unintended consequences for this. And what I'm hearing from fellow board members, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there is additional information that you would like that's come out of this discussion.
No, I've been writing down the questions,
Okay.
and I'll give you all the updates.
All right.
Ms.
So
Frank, I would like to request that the item be brought back for a vote at the next meeting. It will be my last meeting, and at that time, I think the board should be able to vote and offer a reset. Not that it's going away, but if the vote then votes to approve it again as is, so be it. But if the board so sees fit to say, let's do a reset, new board takes seat in January, and hopefully they can, the district can work more with the community. It doesn't mean it's an undo of PLCs, but I just think it would be a way to honor our parents who have spoken up, who have clearly communicated with all of us, and I would like to take that step.
Mrs. O'Brien and then Ms. Tweedy.
All right, I have two things. One, a clarification, Mrs. Fisher, if you don't mind. When you say you'd like it brought back to the next board agenda, is that because what we've been discussing is the day that it's on? Are you asking to go back and say we're back to just 9 half days and no PLCs, or are you asking to have the day considered?
Ms. O'Brien, it's because of the way boards work, and we're kind of both aware of how the things have to be brought back. If the only way to bring it back is to just repeat what we did and either do it again or undo it, then so be it. If there's an opportunity to bring it back in a different way, saying we will have PLCs, however, the date is not set, I would be fine with that. But I think at this point, just saying it's a done deal, which the vote that happened in May says it's a done deal. My concern is we have a long list of things that we've talked about over the last 4 years that I've been on the board that we've said we were going to. We'll bring that back and we'll get back to it. We'll bring that back and we'll get back to it. And a lot of times things just happen and they're pushed through. I started seeking an evaluation SPED day one 4 years later, it's barely started. So my concern is if we don't take an actual action that forces it to be something that must be addressed, my fear is that it won't be addressed. And so, however the district can do it, and have it be to where it's something that needs to be addressed, I'm fine with that. But I do believe that this board voted it in, specifically the three of us, because Ms. Frank and Ms. Tweedy did abstain. But I think that we need to at least set it right with our parents and have it to be where they have an opportunity to address the issue.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Dr. Finch, I apologize. I have one more question that I missed in my notes. What schools, and I realize they're not doing the 90-minute release time because they don't have that time yet, but we do have schools that are doing PLC time that they started it. Could we have that list of schools that are actually doing PLC time already?
Yeah, I think we mentioned that in our initial presentation. We can dig that back out for you.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that. I'll look at the presentation as well.
Okay, and Ms. Tweedy, you had some questions or comments.
I just had a few things. First, I left something off my list, 2 things. What would be the cost of providing extra duty pay to the teachers to do 90-minute PLCs outside of outside of their workday, so that it didn't impact student learning? Because there's a difference between interrupting student learning to have a PLC and having a PLC. The second thing, what's being done to address the concern about not having half days for parent-teacher conference? Because as a teacher, that's extremely important to have parent-teacher conferences. So I don't know if something's being done, but if it is, I would love to know about that. And then the other thing, and just going back to this, I think this is an issue we're fairly divided on. I don't know if minds are changed or with information, if minds are going to be changed, because I could change my mind. Here's my problem. Ms. Frank and I got outvoted, and that's why I didn't ask to bring this item back. I respected the decision and let it rest. You guys voted against us. Approved it. If someone's changing their mind and then the board changes in January, let's just say a different decision were made in December, and the new board, one member could swing it if we were divided. And then we change our mind again in January. That's not exactly fair to the community either. So I don't want to, no matter how this goes, I want something that's decided and stays. It's not fair to the people putting in their effort and communicating it and making plans, regardless of if it goes a way I believe or not a way I believe. And I don't even know what I believe because I asked for information. So, but regardless of which way it goes. But what I would say is, say it went south in December, and then a new board member takes office and nobody likes that it went south in December, and they bring it back on in January and it goes north. That's not really fair to the entire community either. So I would say if this were going to get brought back to vote on, I would rather do it in January because it gives the district more time to gather the information. Whether I get, like I said, whether I end up on the winning or losing end, I would just want a vote that's going to stand. That the back and forth stuff's not good for anyone.
I would concur with you, Ms. Tweedy, and I would say, just for clarification, the only thing at this point that is a discussion for me is the day. Our parents that spoke here this evening all support the continued that 90-minute PLC. So for me, this is not a discussion about whether or not our district gets that. It's a discussion for me of the day and the community feeling like they weren't able to be heard on their day, and I admit, like I said, I think I viewed it through the district lens, through the teacher lens, that the time, and forgot in that particular instance to maybe take into account our impact to our parents, since my kids are older now.
Well, we have asked for a great deal of information from the district, and I don't think it would be fair or prudent of us to not consider and not give them adequate time to get that information to us, as well as I asked for more information from the community, and that can't be gathered in 2 weeks. So kind of where I'm at with this at this particular point, it sounds, what I'm hearing is that we all have questions. We've all asked for additional information. So let's give the district time to provide that to us. And then we would need to look at the next agenda review and see where we are, where that would fit. I have 2 more meetings that you and I will work together on the agenda review, the December meeting and the first meeting in January. Does that seem like fair steps going forward, or do you have a question, Mrs. Ordway?
I do have a question. So as we're deciding which date we're going to put this on, however we're going to, or if we're going to, I think we are, do they stop in their tracks on the work that they're doing? Or how does this affect you?
I think the
Dr.
answer
Finch?
is yes. We stop.
Okay, I just don't want the wheels to be turning if the bus isn't going to get started. That's
That was
all.
one of the reasons why, again, I did this in Michigan, and the mistake we made was we just, if there was a big buildup and then the dam finally broke, and then everyone said, okay, we're in, and we started the next year. We've taken a whole extra year to plan for this very reason.
Okay. All right, that was just a concern.
Okay. Anything further from any other board member before we move on?
No, I'm fine with it coming back in January. I would just, I'm trusting that you guys actually bring it back. Because like I said, there's a lot of things we've brought forward that needed to be addressed, and they somehow get shuffled and lost in the back end. And that is my worry, is that...
No, you don't have to be worried about that. We'll bring it back.
No, I know historically
I know,
experience
but
tells
I
me
gave you
do
my
have to
word that
worry
we're
about
bringing it back. So I said, well, we'll bring it back. The board has said they'll bring it back. We'll bring it back.
Oh.
Okay.
Yep, I'm not
Thank you,
opposed.
Mrs. Fisher. Okay. And I would just like to, again, to thank my fellow board members, thank the community members, and also thank the district for Dr. Finch and Dr. Galligan for the discussion. I know it's not easy. You've spent a lot of time working on this, and then it gets brought back, and that's stressful and difficult for you, but I do appreciate the work that you've done, and we just want to move forward in the way that's going to be best for the community at large. But thank you for the discussion, and I look forward to seeing the information and the questions that are answered in the next couple of weeks. All right, so our next discussion item is 9B, Employee Travel Plan. And I know this was a request from Ms. Tweedy. Would you, yeah, go ahead and.
Okay, so my concern is we don't have a travel budget. We just approve trips all year, and then we find out how much they cost at the end of the year. I think, and when employees take repeated trips and then they leave the district, that money doesn't impact our students. So that was another concern. And then the final concern I had, when I looked at our comparison to other districts, we were paying more on hotel, airfare, and food, but less on, certainly less on conferences and less on all. So if you look at that ratio, expenses that don't reach our students versus expenses that do, we're really high on the expenses that don't reach our students. So I was hoping you guys were bringing forth a plan.
I can start the discussion. I think we've had this discussion now for a year and a half. I don't disagree with you on a budget concept. And as I put in my Thursday update, we did the math from the last 2 years. Our neighbors, our competitive neighbors, comparable neighbors, are we have those. I think Jim might have sent you that data, and we're $100,000 plus less from last year. So the mission was accomplished of trimming the budget. We're less, way less than the average of our comparable peers. So I'd like to again reemphasize kind of my job and your role in that. I would like to start with that number, freeze that number for lack of a better word, as I mentioned in the Thursday update. I believe it's 650. freeze that number, and divide the pie into how many divisions I have, and be allowed as superintendent to horse trade within that division, within the divisions, if there's professional development issues or needs or wants in a specific division, they can borrow from each other. But again, keeping the dollars under the 650 mark. And so that's kind of what I was looking for. But I also want, and in the Thursday update, mentioned the concept of if there are specific rules or concepts that you want to, and you mentioned a couple that you would want us to maybe include in an AMG, administrative guideline kind of a structure. I'm not opposed to that. So if you want to give me those now or via email, that would work too. That's kind of how I'd like to proceed. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know, Jim, if you have any thoughts on comparable to our neighbors, kind of the structure. I kind of just blew by that, but maybe you want to reemphasize that.
Thank you, President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch. Just to reiterate, we did have comparable information for fiscal year 16 and fiscal year 17 from 3 neighboring districts, and we have yet to receive that information for fiscal year 18. But comparing fiscal year 17 data, they were just north of $900,000 combined between travel and conferences. We were at about $750,000 that year. We were able to reduce that $750,000, as Dr. Finch just mentioned, down to $650,000 in fiscal year 18. So there have been a consideration for comments that we have heard from the governing board about trying to, at least in some ways, be more cognizant of travel and conference expenses. But at this point in time, we don't have the comparable data from the other 3 districts. And I want to just comment that I'm not certain that we're going to be able to get that information because I've been led to believe that it might be being used in an inappropriate way because it was at a public meeting that we shared that information with our governing board. And then just one last point, and this is the information that we're asking is in a detailed manner that is only accessible if they're willing to share it with us voluntarily. No other way to get the detail level of information. And because we're talking about specific detail level information, our travel expenses, because I know Ms. Tweedy made a comment that our travel expenses, hotels, mileage, and those things are greater than the other comparable districts. But our travel expenses include reimbursement for itinerant staff that have to travel between schools because of the way we opted to code that. There is no standard for that. So unfortunately, that includes itinerant travel as well as conference travel, which could be airline costs or mileage to get to a conference that might be that requires travel of some sort. So the other comparable districts could include their mileage costs, but I don't know how they're arranged. They may not even have comparable number of itinerant staff. But that is one difference. And again, because we're dealing with detailed information, there aren't any guidelines that provides for the data to be consistently compared.
So I'd just like to thank Dr. Finch for bringing the travel expenses down from the previous year, and also Mr. Miglierino for your efforts to get that information. I guess anyone who's watched any board meetings will know that Ms. Tweedy and I have expressed similar concerns on this item. And, I don't really care if my neighbor bought a Porsche. I'm not going to go out and buy a Mercedes. If I can't afford it, I can't afford it. And I would just wonder, we're sending 1 or 2 people out to a conference, and I look at how that's broken down, and there's $2,000 for hotel and, $1,000 for airfare. Could the money be spent more efficiently if we were bringing people in and we could train more people here than just 1 or 2 people going to an out-of-state conference? So that's something that I would really hope that we would be able to look at, that we would really get more bang for our buck and not have to pay for hotels or have to pay for airfare. Now, it's not as exciting to stay at home as it is to go. I mean, they always have these conferences in really nice places. I've been to lots of conferences, so I know how it goes. But I would just wonder if we could be more efficient with our funds. And
I think that's important. Could we train more people if we were bringing
Sure.
sort of the conference to them?
Yeah,
Ms.
that's
Tweedy?
in general. That's a practice that we want to continue to do and
Well,
get more bang for the buck for
And
sure.
then the other thing is because like when we pay for something, we're not paying for something else.
Right.
So we just sat here and listened to a bunch of school counselors tell us that they're understaffed and we're below acceptable ratios for school counselors and school psychologists. And I realize so within the title budget, I guess it's like when we're spending M&O money, well, if we're spending it here on hotel and airfare, we're not spending it on counselors and psychologists. Now, if it were Title II funds, that could only be used on
Right.
PD. So, I mean, I'm wondering if we could restrict our travel to also certain funds. And that kind of brings up the carry forward on the 301 money. I thought that the carry forward on the 301 money that didn't go to teachers was only going to already encumbered like licensing fees and stuff. Is there any plans to use that $850,000 on travel? Because that would be money that could go to teacher salaries.
No, I think we addressed that in a Thursday update.
Yeah, it said
yeah.
district initiatives, which could mean travel.
Yeah, I don't think. I think the one that you brought up, we changed that funding code because good thing you caught that. So
Right.
that was
yeah,
not there.
that was the one.
Yep.
So none of that money would be spent there.
I
So then-
don't think so.
So then
I
my
don't know. Dr. Galligan would be able to answer that. Am I correct?
President Frank, Ms. Tweedy, Dr. Finch, we are using Title II funds for any of
Okay.
that moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Galligan. Mrs. Fisher.
And
we'll
I
just work our way
know,
down the
Dr.
line.
Finch, that you kind of came in after this. Part of the reason what brought travel forward was when I realized there was a very large expenditure coming across, and so I inquired and was told that the board never looked at travel. And prior to my bringing that forward, they never did. And the travel was out of hand and out of control, and it continued to be for quite some time. Now, I do appreciate you holding it, cutting it down as much as you have. But I think as taxpayers, we all want to have what's best for our teachers, and we want them to be well trained, and our administrators. So I'm not limiting it to just to them or our classified staff. But when I looked at Mr. Miglerino's numbers, just what we had, the year we had, of our travel budget, 41% was on travel. That was our travel expense. The other three districts, Peoria, Paradise Valley, and Dysart, that was presented, they were 24.9%, 24.8%, and 22% respectively. So we are double in travel, and pretty much all districts code the same. So if we're coding the travel between, the gas mileage, the probability is they are as well. They probably are.
I asked at the superintendent's meeting, and they looked at me
Superintendents-
cross-eyed.
Most
They said they
superintendents don't know
didn't,
how finance codes anything. I'm just saying. Probability
I
is
disagree with you on that one, personally.
okay. Probability is that they are funding it the same way. That it's in there. It's in the code. I mean, they set the codes for us from the Auditor General's office, and we all use the same codes. So I guess what's really important is that there is an actual plan to bring it forward. I mean, we had the PLC trip to San Diego, and travel alone on that was almost $30,000. And 2 months later, the exact same training was in Phoenix, and it wasn't.
Yep, we
it
had
wasn't,
that discussion.
and it wasn't title money, and it wasn't grant
Yeah,
money.
that was building money.
No, it was auxiliary funds, which are so flexible they can be used on almost anything.
Right.
Auxiliary funds are your favorite because they can be used. So I would just hope that you would actually honor Ms. Tweedy's request and give her a realistic budget of what is necessary for actual training and reduce the travel, because these things can be done here.
Yep.
Mrs. O'Brien.
Thank you. Mr. Miglerino, could you talked about the itinerant travel, and just can you explain that further so that folks who don't understand that. Will?
Certainly, President Frank, Ms. O'Brien. So we have some staff that that actually provide services on multiple campuses in a given day, and so they have to travel from one site to another. They are responsible to get to their first work assignment on their own, but then we reimburse them for travel mileage for any travel that they have to do during the day to get to another work assignment. And so, this happens in specialized areas. So this would not be a homeroom teacher, right? This is, these are specialty areas that provide services to students typically.
Okay, thank you. Is there any way to have that differentiated from the travel? And
Sure.
maybe I'm looking at the wrong guy. And
Yeah, Jim could do it in his spare time. I think he has to go ask other people.
When I asked that question, I want to know the cost before I say we should. I'm just, if it's,
we can
near impossible.
We can
I know
always
we can
get you
always
whatever
do
you want.
anything.
It just takes time.
It takes time and it takes
Yep.
money. But I guess, is that, Mr. Miglerino, from the look on your face, that's very painful. That look sounds like the cost is incredibly high. So could you be quite forthright with me and tell me the answer to my question?
President Frank, Ms. O'Brien, I mean, it's possible to do. It'll be fairly laborious, but I wouldn't be able to quantify how much time it would take, but it can be done, yes.
Okay. If it is that laborious, I don't want to put that burden. We have too many things to work on. I'd rather work on our overarching guidelines.
I'm sure he would trade it out for the budget committee.
Now you're talking.
I knew I could find your price. Okay, were those your questions? Do you have anything further, Mrs. Ordway? Anything? Okay.
Well, I guess I'm just disappointed because I thought you were going to present an actual travel budget and plan as a preview item, and that didn't happen. So
as I said in the Thursday update, this is my idea, but I don't want to put a ton of work in it and then say that's a bad idea. So my idea is to take the 650 number, call that a budget, divide it into divisions. Jim's already starting to work on it, and then we decide on the rules around that, as we're 20% less than our peers. So I think we have a comfortable number. I would even be comfortable if you said make it 200,000. I wouldn't care.
Let's do it. 200,000.
You can get 3 votes to make it 0. We'll make it 0. So, but I'm not getting that direction from the board. So that's not your role as board members, in my opinion. You're a policy-making unit, and you hire superintendents.
We approve expenditures,
Correct.
and we approve the budget
individually.
And if we're spending ridiculous amounts of money, we're accountable to the voters for
Sure,
that.
sure.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you. Right. Yeah, it's oversight.
For the overarching,
we've always asked from the board, what do you want? Do you want a number or direction from you? And we don't usually get that. And so I'm coming with an idea. If you think that's an idea that is workable, then I'll work with that idea and bring you a budget the next time we get together. But that was my idea in the Thursday update.
So what I'm hearing from you then is that your budget would then be $650,000.
Correct.
So that would be all the travel that's been brought forward so far this year, subtracted from that amount, and then we as board members would know that you would not bring us any travel expenditures that exceeded that $650,000.
Or if you want the number to be 600, I don't really care what the number is.
Well, I would like us not to spend M&O money on travel, because
so maybe that could
go to
be
other
a
needs.
rule, an AMG or something that you would want to put in there. I wouldn't be opposed to that.
So of the $650,000 that we spend on professional development, which also includes some travel, not always.
Right.
Some of the overarching guidelines I heard from my fellow board members are that we spend less money on the actual traveling and bring the PD to us when we can.
Yep.
And I guess that's really the big one, right? And I'm sorry. And then Ms. Tweedy just said to not spend M&O. So is that I'm actually looking at my board members to
Correct.
say those are.
But
Right.
the only problem is that, and like I said, it's my little 2 cents, but you have to be very cautionary when you say you're not going to ever spend M&O, because there are departments that won't be eligible for title or for other things of that nature.
Correct.
Such as your finance department, your transportation department, your maintenance and facilities. There are several. Your
There'll
human
be
resource
unintended
department.
consequences.
Yeah, there is some serious unintended consequence to that, unless you can somehow secure an actual funding source, such as within auxiliary or another area, which that definitely would be a nightmare for Mr. Nicolino and his team. So I would be very cautionary to say no M&O. It would be more responsible, I think, to say we're going to limit M&O to this, and then possibly have those departments that would not fall under any of the rest submit I know that I submitted a request for budget every year, so perhaps they can, from Mr. Migarino, they know they're going to go to ASBO conferences, or what those actually are all in state, so they wouldn't be impacted. But whatever. I would just be cautionary to never say no M&O, because there would definitely be unintended consequences, unless you want teachers trained and you want all others to kind of just be operating on the fly.
Well, and then you'd also want to exempt any trainings or conferences that would pay for with grants. Because
Right,
if someone
fair.
writes a grant and
Correct. So I would be.
So I don't
I
think-
would just be cautionary.
Right. So
with
we don't say
saying
no M&O, that it is minimal M&O, minimal impact to M&O, and as you just stated, or where we have zero cost. I mean, we just approved travel for a staff member who, because she volunteers to serve on their board, travels at no expense to
Correct.
the district, and so and receives that PD for free to us. So, and I think that we also do ourselves a disservice when we only call this travel when it is professional development and travel. Sometimes it's not always just travel. It's not just travel for travel's sake. So I would concur with if you want my 2 cents, I think your idea was great, Dr. Finch. $650,000 is where we're at, and we have the overarching guidelines that we could maybe email you if we think of some after we leave tonight.
Yep. I could start working on that.
And then you can bring that back to us as a preview item
Look like-
next
sure.
board meeting.
Sure. Or at least have more discussion on it, whatever you want, whatever role you want
Okay.
it in.
Okay. So is everyone comfortable with where we're at with this discussion? Okay. All right. If there's speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
You are.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, meeting is adjourned at 9:20, 9:19.